My name is Margaret, and for 45 years, my two-story colonial on a quiet, tree-lined street in suburban Ohio was my sanctuary. It was where I'd raised my son David, where my late husband Robert and I had hosted countless summer barbecues, and where every wall, every scuff on the hardwood floor, held a memory. At 73, I was still in good health, and I cherished my independence within those familiar walls. But lately, a chill had begun to creep into the house, one that had nothing to do with the aging furnace. It arrived every Sunday, right around dinner time, in the form of David and his wife, Susan. It started subtly. I'd be serving my famous pot roast, the one David had loved since he was a boy, and the conversation would drift. "You know, Mom," David would say, tapping his fork against his plate, "this dining room has such great bones. If you ever knocked out this wall here, you could have a fantastic open-plan living space." I'd force a smile, my grip tightening on the gravy ladle. "Oh, I don't know, dear. I kind of like the wall. It keeps the cooking smells out of the living room." Susan would then chime in, her voice dripping with a kind of saccharine condescension she mistook for charm. "Oh, Margaret, but think of the resale value. A modern layout is what buyers are looking for these days." They spoke of my home in the past tense, as if I were a ghost already haunting the hallways. They weren't seeing a home. They were seeing an asset, a line item in their future budget. That particular Sunday, the conversation was more brazen than ever. I had just mentioned that the guest bathroom faucet had a slow drip. David's eyes lit up. "We should probably get a full plumbing inspection done," he said, already pulling out his phone. "No point in sinking money into old pipes if the whole system needs an overhaul before we, take over." Susan nodded vigorously, adding, "Exactly. And while we're at it, we could get a quote on refinishing these floors. They're classic, but a lighter stain would really brighten up the place." I sat there, a piece of pot roast halfway to my mouth, suddenly feeling the food turn to ash on my tongue. They were standing in my home, eating my food, and casually planning the gut renovation they'd perform over my proverbial dead body. I looked from my son's eager, calculating face to my daughter-in-law's smug smile. They weren't talking about leaky faucets or floor stains. They were measuring my coffin. In that moment, the warmth of my home felt like it was being siphoned away, replaced by the cold, hard reality of their greed. I said nothing, just cleared the plates with trembling hands, the clatter of ceramic against the granite countertop sounding unnaturally loud in the sudden, tense silence. The casual Sunday dinner discussions soon escalated into something far more invasive. A few weeks later, David and Susan stopped by on a Saturday morning, unannounced. I was in the garden, tending to the prize-winning roses Robert had planted for me on our 25th anniversary. They were my pride and joy, a living testament to our love. "We were just in the neighborhood," Susan chirped, holding up 2 coffees as a peace offering. But I saw what David was holding in his other hand, a yellow metal tape measure. My heart sank. "Just wanted to get some quick measurements for that open plan idea," he said, trying to sound casual as he brushed past me into the house. For when the time comes. It's good to have a plan." I was left on the porch, stunned into silence. Through the living room window, I could see him, my only son, measuring the walls of my life, while Susan stood in the yard, pointing at my beautiful, blooming roses. "You know, Margaret," she called out, "these bushes must be so much work. When we're here, I think we'll replace all this with a lovely, low-maintenance gravel bed and maybe some minimalist ornamental grasses, much more modern." She spoke with the authority of a new homeowner, not a guest. The sheer audacity of it stole my breath. Later, as I was making them a pot of tea I didn't feel like making, I overheard them whispering in the hallway. I froze by the kitchen door, straining to hear. "We need to make sure she doesn't do anything foolish," Susan said in a low, urgent tone. "Like a reverse mortgage or signing anything over to some bleeding heart charity. This house is our nest egg, David. It's the only way we'll ever afford a place in a neighborhood like this." David's reply was what shattered the last vestiges of my hope for them. I know. I'll talk to her about adding my name to the deed. For estate planning purposes, to make things easier on her." Easier on me? They were vultures, circling, growing impatient. The love I had for my son was being choked by a profound, gut-wrenching disappointment. They didn't see me. They saw a stubborn old woman clinging to their inheritance. That evening, after they'd gone, leaving behind the faint, cloying scent of Susan's perfume, I sat in the dark, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The tears I cried weren't of sadness, but of a cold, crystallizing rage. They wanted a plan? Fine, I would give them a plan. One they would never see coming. There were two things David and Susan mutually despised: clutter and dogs. David was a fanatical neat freak, a man who believed a home should look like an unlived-in showroom. Susan, on the other hand, claimed to have a debilitating allergy to animal dander, a condition she weaponized with theatrical sneezes and gasps for air if a dog so much as trotted past on the other side of the street. Their shared aversion was the stuff of family legend. I remembered a picnic years ago when a friendly golden retriever bounded over to our blanket. Susan shrieked as if she'd seen a grizzly bear, scrambling away while David berated the poor owner for letting his filthy beast run free. It was this shared, visceral hatred that sparked the most wonderfully devious idea in my mind. The following Tuesday, I told them I was going to my weekly bridge game. Instead, I drove to the other side of the county, to a place I knew they would never, ever set foot: the Happy Paws Rescue, a local no-kill dog shelter. It was a chaotic, noisy, and utterly beautiful place. The moment I opened my car door, I was hit by a symphony of barks and yelps, and the earthy, not unpleasant smell of hay, dog food, and disinfectant. I had called ahead, pretending to be a widow looking to volunteer. The director, a kind but perpetually frazzled woman named Maria, gave me a tour. She showed me the kennels, where dozens of hopeful, sad, and joyful eyes peered out at me. She pointed out the leaky roof in the main kennel, the cramped intake room, and the whiteboard filled with desperate pleas for funds for vet bills and food. "We do our best," she said with a weary sigh, "but we're always just one big emergency away from having to close our doors. We run on donations and a whole lot of prayer." As she spoke, a scruffy little terrier mix with one floppy ear and a tail that wouldn't stop wagging pushed his nose through the chain link of his enclosure. I reached down and let him lick my fingers. In his hopeful, trusting eyes, I saw more love and decency than I had seen in my own sons for months. I thought of David, with his sterile, perfect home, and Susan, with her performative allergies. The thought of them having to even think about this place, to have their future so inextricably and financially linked to it, sent a jolt of wicked delight through me. I thanked Maria for the tour, my mind buzzing. The seed of my revenge had been planted, and it was about to grow into something magnificent. Selling a house is a complicated affair. Selling it right under the noses of your eagle-eyed, expectant heirs is a masterclass in espionage. I knew I couldn't just stick a for sale sign in the yard. David drove by my house at least twice a week on his way home from work, a little check-in that I now understood was an inventory check. I needed a co-conspirator. I found one in Brenda, a realtor recommended by my friend from the Bridge Club. I specifically asked for someone discreet and tech-savvy. We met not at my house, but at a quiet corner table in a Starbucks 5 towns over. I laid it all out for her: the greedy kids, the inheritance obsession, the secret plan. I expected a raised eyebrow, maybe a bit of professional judgment. Instead, Brenda leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with what looked like righteous indignation on my behalf. "Margaret," she said, her voice low and conspiratorial, "I've seen this story 100 times. The kids get dollar signs in their eyes and forget the parent is a person. Don't you worry. We'll sell this house so quietly they won't know what hit them." Brenda was a godsend. She was a brilliant strategist. We never once put a sign in the yard. She relied on her private network of realtors and pre-qualified buyers who were looking for a home in my specific neighborhood. Showings were scheduled only on weekday mornings, when I was supposedly at my senior water aerobics class. Brenda would let the clients in, show them around, and lock up, leaving no trace. I would return home to a house that was exactly as I had left it, the air still and silent, holding its enormous secret. The most nerve-wracking part was the paperwork. Brenda would bring documents to our Starbucks meetings, and I'd sign them there, my hand shaking slightly as I penned my name on the listing agreement. It felt both treacherous and liberating. One afternoon, while I was on the phone with Brenda discussing a potential offer, David called on the other line. I quickly clicked over. Hi, Mom. Just checking in. Everything okay? He asked, his voice smooth as oil. Everything is just fine, dear, I said, my heart pounding against my ribs. Just watching my shows. The lie came easier than I thought it would. I was becoming a spy in my own life, and the thrill of it was a potent antidote to the years of feeling like a disregarded piece of furniture. We were building a trap, Brenda and my children were walking straight towards it, blinded by their own avarice. The offer came in on a Thursday. It was from a young family with 2 small children, a doctor and a teacher, who had fallen in love with the house's character and, ironically, the rose garden. They weren't looking to gut it, they wanted to preserve it. They wrote me a letter, telling me how they could already picture their children growing up there, just as mine had. It was the perfect ending for the house's story, a passing of the torch to a family that would fill its walls with love, not speculation. Brenda handled the closing electronically to avoid any risk of me being seen at a title company's office. The money, a staggering $450,000 after fees, was wired directly into a new bank account I had opened for this very purpose. The last few weeks were a blur of quiet, methodical dismantling. I hired a moving company to take only the most precious items to my new, undisclosed location, a luxurious senior living community called Willow Creek Estates. I packed my photo albums, Robert's old armchair, my mother's recipe box, and a few favorite books. The rest, the furniture David and Susan had mentally appraised, the dishes they had eaten off of while plotting, I sold in an estate sale managed by a third party. On the final day, after the movers had gone and the estate sale company had cleared everything out, I walked through the empty house one last time. My footsteps echoed on the bare hardwood floors. The rooms, stripped of a lifetime of accumulation, looked both bigger and sadder. Sunlight streamed through the clean windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air where our lives had once been. I stood in the doorway of David's old bedroom, remembering him as a little boy with a cap gun and an overactive imagination. I touched the worn spot on the kitchen counter, where I'd rolled out dough for 1,000 cookies. A single tear traced a path down my cheek, a quiet goodbye to the woman I used to be and the family I thought I had. But as I walked out the front door and locked it behind me for the last time, the sadness was replaced by a powerful sense of closure. Across the lawn, a man from Brenda's office was hammering a sign into the grass. It had one beautiful final word on it: sold. I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove towards my new life, the heavy weight of my children's expectations vanishing in the rearview mirror. 2 days later, I drove to Happy Paw's rescue. I hadn't told Maria I was coming, nor had I hinted at the magnitude of my visit. I found her in the office, looking exhausted as she tried to untangle a mess of paperwork and donation slips. She looked up as I entered, a weary but welcoming smile on her face. "Margaret, it's so good to see you. Have you come to walk a few of the residents?" she asked, already reaching for a leash. "Not today, Maria," I said, my own smile feeling more genuine than it had in years. I opened my purse and took out a crisp, folded cashier's check. I slid it across the cluttered desk towards her. "I've come to make a donation." Maria picked it up, her eyes scanning the paper. Her expression went from polite curiosity to confusion, then to wide-eyed, staggering disbelief. She looked at the number, then at me, then back at the number. Her jaw literally dropped. Her hand flew to her mouth. $450,000? She whispered, her voice cracking. "Margaret, is this real? This has to be a typo." I simply nodded, the lump in my throat too big for words. "It's real, Maria. Every penny of it." Tears began to stream down her face. She stood up, walked around the desk, and wrapped me in a fierce, trembling hug that smelled faintly of dog shampoo. "You have no idea what this means," she sobbed into my shoulder. "This isn't just a donation. This is a miracle. This is a new roof. This is a proper veterinary clinic on site. This is paying our staff a living wage. This means we can take in the medical cases we always have to turn away. Margaret, you've saved us. You've saved hundreds, maybe thousands of lives." From the kennels down the hall, a happy chorus of barking erupted, as if the dogs themselves somehow knew their fortunes had changed. We sat for an hour, drinking instant coffee from mismatched mugs, while Maria sketched out plans on a legal pad, her face radiant with a joy so pure it was contagious. I told her I wanted the new kennel wing, if they built one, to have a small plaque. She thought I'd want my name on it. No, I said, a slow, wicked smile spreading across my face. I want the plaque to read, "Generously funded in honor of David and Susan Miller, whose profound love for dogs made this all possible." The look of confused delight on Maria's face was worth more than every dollar on that check. I was sitting on the balcony of my beautiful new apartment at Willow Creek Estates, sipping a chilled glass of Chardonnay and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Life was good. I had a 2-bedroom unit with a modern kitchen I barely used, thanks to the fantastic dining hall. I'd joined a book club, a water aerobics class, and a group of women who played a merciless game of canasta 3 times a week. I was free. That's when my phone rang, shattering the peaceful twilight. The caller ID read, "David." I took a deep, calming breath, took a sip of my wine, and answered. "Hello, dear." His voice was frantic, laced with a panic I had never heard before. Mom, what is going on? We just drove by the house, and there's a sold sign in the yard. A real one. What kind of sick joke is this? Did you let some scam company put that up?" I swirled the wine in my glass, the picture of tranquility. "It's not a joke, David. I sold the house." There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. I could hear his sharp, ragged intake of breath. Then, a shriek in the background. Susan had obviously been listening on speaker. "She what?" her voice screeched, shrill and ugly. David came back on the line, his voice now shaking with rage. "You sold it? Without telling us? How could you? That was our house. That was our future. What about the money? Where's the money, Mom?" This was the moment I had been waiting for. This was the crescendo of my symphony. I took another delicate sip of wine before delivering the final, devastating blow. "The money?" I said, my voice as calm and clear as a winter morning. "Oh, that. I was so glad to finally have some liquid assets. It felt wonderful to be able to make a real difference, to support a cause I've recently become very passionate about." "What cause? What are you talking about?" David demanded. I let the pause hang in the air for a perfect, torturous second. "I donated it," I said sweetly, "every last penny, to the Happy Paws Rescue Dog Shelter. They were so grateful. They're even going to name the new wing after you and Susan." The silence that followed was the most satisfying sound I have ever heard. It was the sound of greed choking on itself. It was the sound of my victory. Then, with a click, the line went dead. It's been 6 months since the phone call. I haven't heard a word from David or Susan, and the silence is the greatest gift they could have ever given me. My life at Willow Creek is fuller and richer than I could have imagined. I have friends, I have activities, and most importantly, I have peace. I am no longer Margaret, the caretaker of the family asset. I am just Margaret, a woman enjoying her life on her own terms. 2 weeks ago, I received a package in the mail. It was from Maria at Happy Paws. Inside was a framed photo of the groundbreaking ceremony for the new wing. A large banner was strung up behind a row of smiling staff and volunteers holding shovels. On the banner, in big, bold letters, it read, "Future home of the David and Susan Miller Kennel Wing." Beneath the photo was a handwritten note from Maria. "The plaque is on order," it said. "We can't thank you enough." I laughed until tears streamed down my face. I put the photo on my mantelpiece, right next to a picture of Robert and me on our wedding day. My children were so obsessed with the idea of inheritance, with the material legacy I would leave behind. They thought a house, bricks, mortar, and a healthy property value was the most important thing. They failed to understand that a true legacy isn't something you leave for people, it's something you leave inside of people. They wanted my house, but they never valued the home I'd made within it. They saw the floors, but not the footprints of a life well lived. They saw the walls, but not the love that held them up. In the end, they have nothing but the bitter taste of their own avarice. I, on the other hand, have everything. I have my freedom, my self-respect, and the profound satisfaction of knowing that my life's work, the equity I built over a lifetime with my husband, was not squandered on entitlement. Instead, it was transformed into a sanctuary. It became warm beds, full food bowls, life-saving medical care, and a second chance for hundreds of unloved creatures. My children thought I was just a clueless old lady. But I was the one who taught them their final, most valuable lesson. Never, ever underestimate a mother, especially when you've given her a reason to fight back.